All right, well, good morning, students, or good afternoon, whenever you're watching this. Today I'm going to do a little mini lesson on the thesis statement. Now, if you're in third period, you have not yet seen this, so I suggest that you watch this if you want to be able to craft a very good thesis statement for your argumentative paper. Before we get started, I do want to say the thesis statement is the most important sentence in your essay. If you don't have a strong thesis, you do not have a strong paper. So I highly suggest that you take the time to watch this video, maybe take some notes, maybe some Cornell notes on what a good thesis statement looks like, and I provide you some examples as well as I go through the presentation. So here we go. A brief explanation of what the thesis statement is. It's a statement that identifies the purpose of your paper or previews its main ideas. So basically, you'll find this in the introduction. It's one of the last sentences that you'll place in your introduction, and it basically answers the question, why? Why am I writing this paper? So you want to make sure it's very clear to the reader what you're trying to prove throughout the rest of your paper. So a thesis statement is not a fact or observation. It should be something that is arguable. So for instance, a bad example of a thesis statement would be, people use many lawn chemicals. Yeah, okay, that is a fact. So it's not something that you can really prove or disprove. It's just a statement. So rather than saying that, an example of something that would be an assertion or a claim would be, people are poisoning the environment with chemicals merely to keep their lawns clean. Right? That's something you can argue, that's something you can prove. You can go find evidence, statistics or a study that's been done about harmful effects of chemicals on the lawn. And so that's something you could go about kind of explaining and proving throughout your paper. Okay? So that's the first thing. If you need to stop this video at any point to finish writing your notes, feel free to do so. That's kind of the beauty of these presentations, is you can stop them whenever you need to. So I'm going to move on, but if you need to pause it here, go for it. Next up, a thesis statement takes a stand rather than announcing a subject. Announcing your subject is a really immature move on a writer's part. It's something that you did maybe when you were in elementary school, but it's something that we definitely want to move away from as we get older. So an announcement would be something like, the thesis of this paper is, right? So you're telling them that this is your thesis, but you want it to be so clear to the audience that this is your thesis that you don't actually have to tell them that. So we want to rework that sentence a little bit to cut out that first part because it's not necessary. If you did a good job crafting your thesis statement, it's not necessary. So another way you could do this is by saying, solving our environmental problems is more difficult than many environmentalists believe. So if you compare the two, we just kind of retooled that sentence a little bit. It still gets at the same thing, but it sounds much more mature, and it's obvious that that's the topic of your paper. So you don't need to tell the audience that that's what your paper is going to be about. This one should be obvious, I would hope, at this point, but just to clarify, a thesis is the main idea of your paper. It is not the same as your title. So those two things should not be exactly the same. I think the biggest difference between the title and the thesis is the fact that your title is probably not a complete sentence, and your thesis most definitely should be. So, for instance, the title of your paper may be Social Security and Old Age. That's a very succinct, non-sentence way to tell the audience that that's the content of your paper. But your thesis should be much more detailed and much more narrow in its scope. So a good example of a thesis for a paper on that topic would be, continuing changes in the Social Security system make it almost impossible to plan intelligently for one's retirement. Awesome, it's a complete sentence. It still tells us the connection between Social Security and when you get older. And it also picks a side, right? So they're saying, the Social Security system is not making it easy for people to plan for their, the money they're going to make when they're retired. So it does all of the things we've already discussed and more. Next up, this is, I think, the most common problem I see with thesis statements at your age group, I think, is that your thesis statement is often too broad. So think narrow, okay? And what I mean by that is if you tackle a topic that is too broad, meaning there are too many subjects that you would have to cover in your paper, you're setting yourself up for a weak paper actually, because there's no way you can prove all of the things you need to prove in your paper. So for instance, if, God help you, you had to write a paper about the American steel industry, let's say. If you were to say, the American steel industry has many problems, ooh, okay, well, how many? And what are they? Right? So you could potentially have to write a 100-page paper because maybe there are 100 problems with the American steel industry, and you don't want to do that. So if you identify the primary problem or a couple of the main problems, and you can explore those in depth and provide support for them, you're going to have a really strong paper and a really strong thesis. So avoid these broad generalizations, this many, a lot. Try and cut words like that out completely from your papers, but certainly do not use them in your thesis. So a way you could narrow that topic down is as follows. The primary problem of, not if, sorry, of the American steel industry is the lack of funds to renovate outdated plants and equipment. Awesome, so they have narrowed down many, which could be innumerable, to just the one problem, the main problem that's going on in this industry. And they're going to focus on that in their paper. Now that is a smart move, and that's something that you'll want to keep an eye on in your own thesis and your own paper. All right, next up. Keep it specific. This is sort of connected to narrow, but it's a little different. So an example of a vague thesis statement would be Hemingway, who's Ernest Hemingway, an author. Hemingway's war stories are very good. Okay, like how good? Why? Right? So we're already left with these questions of like, in what way are they good? So you'll want to avoid something vague like that because you could have to explain 40 different ways that Hemingway's war stories are good, right? You could focus on any number of things. So what this person has done is they've recognized, okay, this was vague, how can I make this better? And so they identified 3 specific ways that his war stories are very good. Hemingway's stories helped create a new prose style by employing extensive dialogue, shorter sentences, and strong words. Awesome. This is a really, I think, traditional looking thesis statement. It's one that you will probably use in your analysis and your argumentative essays in terms of style, because you notice that towards the end there, he has a list of 3 different ways in which Hemingway's war stories are good, right? So I know immediately as the reader that probably if this is a regular 5-paragraph essay, that in body paragraph number 2, he's going to talk about extensive dialogue. He's going to provide examples and analysis of that. Same with shorter sentences. Body paragraph number 2 is probably going to be about that. And body paragraph number 3 is going to be strong words. So he set himself up for a really strong paper here. Next up. Here we go. A thesis statement has one main point rather than several main points. This can confuse the reader, and you want to kind of avoid that if you can. So I don't think many of you have a problem with this, but just to show you an example of how to fix it if you do, it's pretty easy. So we see here this person is writing a paper about Stephen Hawking, who is a really famous physicist and scientist and things. So they said, Stephen Hawking's physical disability has not prevented him from becoming a world-renowned physicist, and his book is the subject of a movie. Well, that seems out of place, right? That seems like something they were just like thinking about, like, oh, I really liked that movie, The Theory of Everything, about Stephen Hawking. But it's not really pertinent to their paper. Maybe they could throw it in, somewhere else in their introduction, but it certainly should not be attached to their thesis statement. So you notice that the only difference between the first and second sentence is that we cut off that last little bit after the comma in the first sentence, because it just, it implies that we're going to be analyzing that he's the subject of a movie, which is really not what the paper is about at all. So we would just lop that off and we have a clean looking thesis statement. This last bit is just a note. Oftentimes we write our paper in order, right? which makes sense. You write your introduction, and then you go to your body paragraphs, and then you craft your conclusion. But I just want to make sure you know that a lot of times when we start to write a paper, and then when we get into kind of our evidence and our body paragraphs, the purpose of our paper might change a little bit from what we originally thought it would be. So if you find that your paper ended up in a different spot than you originally thought, it's okay to go back and rewrite your thesis statement. So do not think it's written in stone. It's not like, written on a tablet somewhere on a mount. It's something you can change, and it's something you should change if your paper kind of veers into a direction that's different than you originally thought. So just keep that in mind, and that's all I have for you today. Have a good day, guys.